Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Once again, I'm on the 2007 Jeep Wrangler that has, the red lightning bolt of death. There is something that I've been wanting to do on this for a while. I've actually bought the part 3 or 4 months ago, maybe more than that. I've had the part for a while. I've just not done it because I didn't think I needed it. But when I start this thing up, there is sometimes a little bit of a, or not just start it up, when I'm running it, I can hear what I think is an exhaust or a vacuum leak around on the top of the engine. Potentially at the intake. I have sprayed carb cleaner around the entire area, doused almost an entire can once to try and hear it, try and find a leak, but I never found one. So I don't think there's. So I couldn't find one if there is, but I think it's old, it's dirty. I think it needs that intake gasket anyway. So I'm just going to get into it, and I'm just going to do it. Well, I got it here, and I'm battling this other problem. Maybe an intake leak could cause a throttle problem with the throttle control. Who knows? But it's worth a shot. I think there's a couple other videos where this is done. So I don't know if I need to walk through completely, but I'll give you guys my version of the video. Of this at least. So it looks pretty straightforward. Clearly you get the intake on top here. There's a lot of dirt and debris that I'm gonna try and get off of there. I think towing this thing behind the RV does kick a lot of dirt and debris up onto it, so maybe I'll even need to get out the vacuum, but do everything I can to keep it clean, keep any of this dirt from going down into the intake. That shouldn't be too hard, but obviously we've got this upper intake, a few things to take off here. It looks like I think the fuel rail I can leave attached to that lower part of the intake. A few items to take off. I think the EGR pipe here I can just bend to the side. We'll see if I can do that. A couple of vacuum hoses that should be able to push out of the way. I think I can just leave that. Obviously you don't want to mess with the have to deal with AC recharging it and whatnot, so I'm just going to leave the AC line where it is. Going to have to drain some coolant here to pull this coolant line out of the way, so hopefully I don't make a mess there. I will try to reuse it because I do keep my coolant jug or drain pan clean. And then I'm going to leave the throttle body on. I'll pull the this rough country cold air intake off. That should be pretty simple. And then we should be able to get to the bolts, pull the upper part of the intake off. I think the bracket for the alternator needs to come off, and then it looks like the coil pack probably needs to come off as well. So I'll pull the coil pack loose. I'm just going to leave it hanging. I'm not going to try to take the wires off or anything. I'm just going to leave it hanging. I should be able to pull this bracket off. So yeah, it looks like 8mm, 10mm, 13mm. 3 separate sizes, probably all I'm going to need here, so I'll go with that. I may need to pull the this is the alternator cable. Hopefully I can leave that alone and don't need to mess with that. So yeah, I'm gonna set up hopefully a good of angle as I can for you and walk through this as I pull it apart, and hopefully it doesn't take too long. It's 4 p.m. right now, so we'll see how long this takes to get apart and get back together. Obviously, setting up cameras and recording do take a little time as well. So let's get at it. All right, it took me about 40 minutes or so to pull that. 45 minutes. So I know someone's been in here before. First, I don't know if you see, I do have the upper intake over there. Typically, I think over here also you can see the gaskets are blue, which tells me they're probably Felpro gaskets that someone has already put in here. So that was the first time I saw them come out. I think the original ones are white. So I did see that was a thing. And then when I got back on these fuel injector harness, and these, Chrysler has to have a red clip for everything, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be Chrysler. Well, the one in the back, as you can see here, is missing the red clip. So the hardest one to get to, they probably broke it getting it off and they never put it back on. So the rear fuel injector harness was not done. And then, you know, I guess just looking here, I don't know what that, you know, if that's new. Yeah, that could be new. I think that's new. But, you know, some of these aren't the best. I think at first glance it looks, yeah, I can't tell if it's had any, yeah, if there's any real problem with it, or if anything, you know, anything jumps out that there is an issue. Maybe once I pull this valley pan out, we'll know. You know, all this paint is crusted off, so that has been a thing. So we'll check the original. I'll pull this out, clean it up, and then yeah, let's go inspect the other one real quick, and then we'll just pull this. I'll pull this out apart and get it cleaned up. So obviously not much are on these rubber O-rings for this gasket, but you know, here, that's all fuel. I just, yeah, cool, yeah, go ahead, bubble up my rubber mat. You know, just looking at this, inspecting, you know, it's not too bad. You can see kind of the cross scratching versus hatching, from, you know, whoever did this before. So, but I'll get my little roll lock out, and I'll do the same thing. But yeah, let me clean it up, and see where I'll inspect everything else, and then I'll start putting it back together. So I've got this all back together. The intake is just actually put it back in last night, so it's just sitting on the gasket, the valley pan there. But that went in pretty easily. It hung up a little bit on the back where the little retainer is, but it wasn't too bad. It took an extra minute, but there are two 10mm bolts, and I'll show you the retainer and talk about that here in a second. And I just tighten those down, and that holds. I did put a little bit of black RTV in that valley there, especially on the edges, but you know, I just slobbered some and then made sure to RTV those bolts because it looked like they were RTV'd in the past. So that held down. That's all that holds that metal gasket down. And then I just set this in place, and I went ahead and cleaned the bolts, and I'm gonna put some liquid Teflon tape here and install those. So I did set up a camera and recorded all of this while I did it. So it's 45 minutes of me barely talking and just doing it. So what I think I'm going to do, where most people will record it and then say, hey, I'm just going to do all that backwards, I'm going to show you putting it back together, and I'll focus on that, and I'll talk about a few things before I get down to torquing it. The first thing, obviously, I don't think I recorded, or you'll see the cleaning. Once I pulled that, I used the blowgun, a lot of blowgun, a lot of cleaning it out. I vacuumed first, and then I blew it out because there's a lot of sand and debris and stuff in there from towing or just from everything. So it was pretty dirty. So I blew it out really, really well, over and over again. And then once I pulled this out, I stuffed rags down in each of the ports here before I pulled it out, just to make sure nothing fell in there. Once I pulled it out, I actually blew out the ports as well. And then once I pulled that valley pan out, and I'll show you the old one here, I put rags down and then tucked them in so that I could clean and use my die grinder with the roll lock bits on there to clean the gasket surface. And I did it with the intake as well. I probably spent an hour just cleaning and taking my time to make sure it was good. So here is the old valley pan, and I'll show you. So I do know this has been gone through before because it says Felpro, so it's not a and I don't know why it did this. The other one doesn't look like it's got paint, but I don't know, maybe it is, you know, powder coated or something in some way. But yeah, this was all crumbly and falling apart. I think I had a little bit of a video of that, but they have these, the 10mm bolts go through these little retainers. I guess they're a retainer, something to spread the load. Underneath is a rubber gasket, a small rubber gasket with some plugs. When those stayed in place, because the person before had put some silicone there, so when this popped up, these came with it, and it very quickly did that and slid back, and as I lifted it up, they both fell into the engine. So the one I didn't see, but one I saw, I was able to just grab that with my fingers. The other one, I didn't see it at all, and I knew it wasn't around, so I had to get my magnet and really fish around for it before I found it down in the engine next to the camshaft. And it actually fell further as I was trying to get it out with my magnet. So saved myself there. That was very fortunate. But yeah, again, this is Felpro. If once you pop it, pop it off of the where it's sticking in the valley, make sure you retain these metal retainers and they don't fall down in the engine, because that is a bad day if you don't do that. So for cleaning, I did use these roll-lock discs. This one is plastic. It's supposed to be non-marring for aluminum. I use that mostly, but on parts of the head here, probably right around here, it was quite crusty from maybe it was coolant built up or something. So I did have to go to this 3M, this other roll-lock disc, and get this one just wouldn't cut through that stuff. So I cut down and then I went back to this one so I wouldn't mar up the surface. So the surface looks pretty good, and I'm just pretty much ready to go back together. Other tips here. So I went through this wiring to make sure there were no no frayed cut wires, none of these sensor wires or injector wires are cut, rusted through, messed up, but some of this shielding was already kind of gone and flaking off, so I went ahead and taped them up, get those looking a little bit better. The EGR wiring across the back, one of the wires was crushed a bit, but it didn't look like it was cut through. I did isolate that wire and then retape that harness because that harness was also opened up. So I made sure that was looking good and those wires were all set. And the oil pressure sensor, oil pressure switch wire does run down to the bottom of the engine there next to the oil filter. That's the only wire that is kind of not right accessible from the top. I guess you could just cut it and then splice it back in and make it easy if you wanted to, but I was able to not even to leave that wire and just pull this the harness to the side, and it wasn't a problem. So it all kind of came out pretty easily without that. I don't know if this EGR has ever been changed, so I went ahead and got a new one. I'll put that in on the way as we're doing this. Again, it's in there pretty good. So I think I might have to use a pry bar and some pliers and mangle that old one up to get it off. And then as I put this back together, I'll talk about all the bolts. That the rear bolt and the upper intake is tough to get to. The two bolts back here are also tough to get to. All the rest are pretty easy. Fairly easy. Everything else clips into place. For coil pack, I just took off the top two bolts, and then I pried it back a little bit with the pry bar, and then I'll just push it back by hand when I'm done. That saved me from getting those bottom bolts that are pretty rusty and a little tough to get to, so didn't even worry about it. But yeah, looking at it as well, it looks like they've also, it's got the blue gaskets for the valve covers, so it looks like someone's also done that as well. So yeah, it's looking pretty good so far, but I do have one thing that I need to grab the light for and probably show you. Again, if you followed the saga of the Jeep, you know that this thing has a electronic throttle control light. I've replaced the throttle body, throttle pedal, multiple sensors. Nothing has the computer has made it better, but not completely fixed the problem. But what I have found here, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, it's a pretty tight angle here. This is the EGR tube, and I replaced this EGR valve a little over a year ago, maybe longer, maybe a couple of years ago, and it's quite loose. I think the best way to get to it is from the wheel well, but it's possible that this could be the when I sprayed this down with carb cleaner, I focused on the intake. I didn't spray down to the EGR, so it's possible that this EGR valve could be sucking vacuum when it sits in it and it gets fully warm, or you're at a stoplight at some of those times, and this EGR demands, or it's obviously rich, and it demands, fuel-rich air from the exhaust, and the EGR turns on, but I never actually heard. It does have a couple of other exhaust leaks because of some things that have been done to it, but I haven't fixed that center pipe. But it could be leaking exhaust there, and it could be, since this has a manifold vacuum to it, it could be the vacuum leak I think I may be hearing. So it could be causing a vacuum leak. It could be when it's opening, it's got the leaking exhaust and vacuum leak. So the manifold air pressure and the fuel air mixture that it's demanding from the computer is not correct, and that is causing it to go into limp mode and have the ETC light on. So once I get this back together, I will find out if that is our culprit. I'll walk you through what I do if I think the end of the EGR valve tube is bent, or if I just need some spacers. Whatever I need, I'll figure it out. I'll try to get you guys in there. Hopefully, yeah, it's pretty easy, I hope, and we can get to it and we'll be able to see what's going on. First thing though I'm going to do is bolt and torque down this intake. I got the specs. It's pretty much crossing and then working your way out, and it's 200 inch-pounds. So I'll torque this down, put this wiring kind of back together, place the EGR, and then we'll move on. So, but as I walk through putting this back together, the bolts here, all of the bolts, and I just left them in my tray here, just evenly spaced. All of the bolts are 10 millimeter head, except for front left, and by front left I mean the front passenger side bolt. So this bolt here on the passenger side, closest to the thermostat, I would say closest to the oil fill, is this 13 millimeter stud. All the rest are 10 millimeter, and they go right in there pretty easy. Like I said, those two in the back I couldn't get with I did get it eventually with the air ratchet, but it was pretty tough getting back there. I did have to use a regular ratchet. The rest came out with a air ratchet or my impact. So again, I'll put the thread lock, the thread paste on there, and I'll put those bolts in, tighten them down by hand, and then I'll put them all in. I'll torque them down. So let me get to that. Ready to torque them down. That back left bolt is just a bear. Coming out, it felt like I was going to break it, so I had to be really careful with it. And going back in, I actually had to slot the side. So one of the things I like to do is put a little slot in the side with the angle grinder. Kind of helps it to clean the threads it's going into, but I had to back it out, run it in, back it out, run it in. It was not very friendly to me. So let's go ahead. Got this torque wrench set to about 200 inch-pounds, and we'll torque this guy down. Okay, so these rear bolts, not terribly difficult to get to, but a little harder. That one, the one over here, and it's just a bear. Getting it out, all of the, I don't know if it's in a coolant jacket or what, but a lot of crud on it. I did clean it, tried to clean the studs out. You know, if anything happens and I've got a leak, I know it's back there when I put this thing back together. You're always afraid something like that, something that goes in so, it gives you such a fight as it goes back in. You know, is that a problem? Is it going to be an issue? You know, I think I'm good, but who the heck knows? The only way to do that right, or to do that better, I think it's right. But if there's a problem, this whole intake's got to come off, and then you got to run a tap down that hole to chase those threads to make sure they're clean. And I think it's not necessarily the threads, because the threads on the bolt look fine. It looks like it's threading in the right way. Starts easy. It's the all of the thread sealant that's been used on this thing over the years in this last job and in this one. So first thing I'm going to do now, next thing is put these fuel injector wires back on. So I'm going to go ahead and reconnect our injectors. Nope. There we go. There's got to be an audible click. Again, this one back here, that little wire is not going to click because they've taken whoever worked on this the last time. I mean, it could have been me, but it wasn't me. It did click. Obviously, there is an initial click, but the red lock click did not happen. So there's two clicks. That one clicked twice. That one, well, I felt it click with my finger, so that one went in twice. So this is the map sensor. The map sensor out of the way. Throttle position sensor. Coolant temp sensor. This is the, and we got the idle air intake temp sensor. The crankshaft sensor is now connected. It just clicked. And then some of these little retainers for wires. This one is for the oil pressure switch. Yeah, the rest looks like we're pretty good up. Next thing I'm going to do is pull this EGR valve out. I fought with this with some pliers first. Let's see. This thing is not, yeah. Maybe I got to vice grip it. All right, I'll put these on here and maybe get a pry bar underneath and try to yank that up. Okay, so this EGR valve is stupid. So I have these diagonals. I'll try to get you in here. Hopefully you can see. I get these diagonals to actually bite down on this because the other pliers keep coming off, and then pry underneath. Get it out. This thing is not budging. There. Wow. So here's the old one. Here's the new one. So there's still some of this. It's supposed to be rubber, but this is hardened plastic. This thing's ever been replaced, but yeah, I'll get the rest of that plastic out now that this thing's out, and then I'll put a new one in there. Wow, it should not have been that difficult. Nothing complicated with this upper intake. I just use this flat pick, put it in the this rag here, and then went around and clean these ports where these seals fit just the best I could. So yeah, they drop right in there. They hold themselves in. You know, I didn't know if I would need to, in some cases, if they don't hold in very well, you can put a tiny little dab of RTV just to make sure they hold in there well. But these seem to be nice and snug. So a couple of the old ones did stay on the intake, but these are doing well. So yeah, that's it for these. I'll put this on and I'll torque this one down, and then I'll tidy up on top, and then I'll get that to that EGR. upper intake bolts started and finger tight. I will tell you the 6 in the front, not too bad. This one, the second one from the rear on the driver's side, the AC is in the way just slightly. You can move it. It is in the way a lot on the one in the rear. You got to move the other way and go between the two AC hoses. Now this one on the passenger side rear is the toughest one to get to. I reconnected the fuel line and I had to disconnect the fuel line again, because without the fuel line connected, you don't have enough room to slide it back. I don't know if you can see it back here, but this fuel line has to slide back enough for you to get the tool on it. I don't know if I can get the torque wrench on there. The only thing I was able to get on this to take it off and to even tighten it, I couldn't even finger tighten it very well, was a 1/4 inch with a deep well 10mm socket. That got on there enough. So I think I'm just gonna have to hand tighten it with that the best I can. I think with these, I'll be able to use a, with the 6 that are closest to the front, I'll be able to use this one. And I think I'm gonna have to use just a plain 10mm deep well on this side, and then I'm just gonna have to go by hand back here, and hopefully I don't have to go by hand here. So let's torque these down and be one step closer to completing this job. Sure. Now the lower intake was 200 inch-pounds. This one is 105 foot-pounds. This torque wrench is not a good one, so I mean it's okay. It's a cheapo torque wrench, so got it set the best I know to 105, because it goes by increments of like 20 or something like that. So come on, give me my socket. Not a lot left now. Map sensor. Pop this ignition module back in place. Ignition module. This coil pack. I won't call it by the right name. That'd be handy. Oh, come on. So now I struggle with this bolt here. Then as I got it off, and I started to put this bracket on the alternator, I realized that I'm pretty sure this bolt goes here. There was only one bolt holding that. It only needs one bolt, but only one bolt holding this, the top of the bracket of the coil pack on. So that bolt was missing already. And I struggled with it. It went in, it fits. It's just a simple through hole for that bolt. It's nothing, no big deal. But yeah, it doesn't quite leave me with a bolt for the alternator if I put that one in there. So now I just have a few things left. I can put the fuel line back on. That's pretty easy. It's already on. Put the clip back in place. That's pretty simple. I will tell you that maybe contributing to this EGR issue is that this bolt hole, there's no bolt here. So the bracket, when I remember I did not lose a bolt when I did this. So this bracket was missing a bolt hole already. So that one is already missing. But I have the EGR tube. I'm sorry, the PCV valve tube, EGR tube, and a vacuum line, and then the throttle body to hook up, and we're done. So I might save this one until I'm done with EGR, and then we'll put the rest of it back together. So I will go ahead and put the throttle body in now. I think it'll be a little easier without the hose hooked up, and I'll hook up these hoses. Got a lot of it back together. Actually, all of it, aside from the EGR tube, which I'm gonna lift this side of the vehicle up, pull the wheel off, and I have great access from the side here, so I'll take that fender well out, and do it from there. But this, what I struggle with, the EGR PCV tube, that the constant tension clamp that, you know, some of these constant tension clamps are terrible. This one is one of the worst, and it's super tight on this side. But I was able to get it down there. It's the same as this one here, but this one's much easier to get to. The throttle body bolted on just as easy as normal. With the upper radiator hose off, it is slightly easier to get to. I would say absolutely easier to get to. I don't know where that one would go, but here is the air temp sensor finally on, and I think I can mount that. Yeah, that should be about right there. And then I got to fill up some coolant here. I put the intake back on. Yeah, that's it. It was pretty simple. Obviously the heater hose, and that's all she wrote. So let me lift it up and find out about that EGR, and then we can start it up, prime the fuel tank and fill the coolant and go for a drive. Okay, pull out this EGR tube, put it on a surface you might be able to see. I think this is clearly here, so it's bent here in the front. It's clearly blown out here. The tube itself has a piece of maybe the old gasket, or maybe this gasket still stuck to it. The bolts tightened. They came out pretty easy. They felt almost like they were loose, but you couldn't tighten them anymore. So maybe I'll try to find some washers. They're very simple bolts, 8mm head bolts. Here, I got one here. They look a lot like this one. They went right in, came right out. It seemed like there's enough room. They're not bottoming out inside of the housing. So yeah, maybe it's just this piece here needs to be cleaned up, and I'll find another gasket and put this thing back together. Well guys, I am thoroughly and utterly dejected. Can you see what I see? Yeah, there's a drip. So I thought maybe that's some leftover coolant after I moved the... Hey, I put some water in it, and yeah. Yeah. Can I say yeah again? Yeah, it's dripping from the back. I'm thinking it's got to be that rear bolt, and it's not even pressurized. It's just simply I just simply put water in it. I think the cap's still off. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. I think one of the YouTube pages I like is SV Seeker. I think he says we do it right because we do it twice. And I don't know if it's him or someone else, but the motto I take is it's not worth doing. It's not worth doing twice. So yeah, guess I'm gonna pull this apart, clean it up, chase those threads, clean that bolt, and make sure it's seating properly before I go any further. So yeah, I'm gonna do this twice. When you're motivated, it took me about 15 minutes to get this thing back apart. You don't have to take the PCV valve tube off, by the way, if you're just doing this job. I can't find anything that's going on with it. Everything looks okay. Even the bolts weren't wet, but it wasn't necessarily leaking on that rear bolt. It was, you know, the water jacket is in front of it, and it was kind of about where that water jacket is. The last two bolts on the left, on the passenger side, they went in very difficult. You know, they started easy, but you know, I think there's a lot of thread sealant inside of those holes, and I clearly had a lot of problem with the one in the back, just a little bit with the one a little farther up. So I'm just going to chase all these. I've got a it's what, 8 by 125. So I'm going to chase all of these bolts, and then I'm going to chase all the threads so that I have good bolts. Then I'll put it back together, and then hope that I don't have to take it apart again. And then I'm going to go run to O'Reilly's. They have another, I cleaned up the EGR piece. They have another EGR, kind of a universal. I'll make sure it's the same size for the gasket. They've got a gasket actually for the top of the, got one of these gaskets here, so I might as well grab that as well. And then we'll put it back together, add some fresh coolant, and see if we're good to go. So, all right, I'm going to chase these threads and throw this thing back together. All right, so I'll try to give you a look at what I'm doing. So I got the vacuum off, but while I'm doing this, with one hand I'm holding the vacuum under here, and then I call this stubby bob. Got my little stubby 3/8 with the 3/8 adapter for the tap, and I'm just running this down by hand as I vacuum, and then to pull it out, I'll just use the air ratchet and draw it out. So it takes 30 seconds or so, maybe a little more for each hole, but I've only got 2 left, and then I'll put it in, tighten it down, and we'll put some water in it, see what we got. So hopefully, like I said, I think those two, the holes in the back, especially those two, came with a lot of crud on the tap. So I think those 2 holes, the bolts, I hit torque because of all the crap in the hole. The bolts were torqued before they were fully seated and pushing the intake against the gasket, and thus sealing the coolant jacket. So yeah, I'll tighten that down, or I'll finish this and then put this back together, at least the lower and upper intake, before obviously I got to click all this together, but I'll put those back together, and hopefully, I guess I could just put the lower one on and the coolant hoses, and then put some water in it, and we'll see where we're at. Yeah, wish me luck. All right, this is going to be a fun one to edit, but we're torqued again. The good news is I wasn't able to finger tighten all the way down any of the bolts before. This time I was able to finger tighten every single one, that with the exception of the rear one, but I was able to finger tighten quite a bit, and I think it's just because I couldn't get this all the way on there. But the ratchet was able to send it all the way home, where before I was fighting it back and forth, and it did not. I had to tighten it with the regular ratchet, not the electric ratchet. So let's go ahead and see if we can get 200 foot-pounds out of this. It did seat extremely nicely, I will say. I had a little trouble last time, but I thought I had it. And it seems like it just went right on this time. So we'll see what we got here. Last one. Nice. Okay, now I'll just go back through what I did before, put some water in it after I go and buy those parts, and some antifreeze, and cross my fingers and hope there's no more coolant leak. Just filled it with fresh antifreeze. This thing is completely back together, aside from the EGR valve, or EGR tube. I don't hear any drips. As for that EGR tube, about to replace it here. I did put a new, went to O'Reilly and got a new gasket, or the O-ring there for the top. This one, apparently they didn't trust how it was in because they had gooped it with some silicone. So it was a little bit of a yank coming out. But I also got the new gasket for down below here. So again, I haven't heard anything splash, but it's a moment of truth. I don't see any fresh drips. I mean, it's still wet from before. It's all sprayed off. I've put my coolant pressure tester on, and I've pumped it up to, what's it, 13, 14 PSI. Again, being quiet. Don't hear any drips. And the back of that engine, she's dry. So no other drips at all. So I think I fixed it. I did have to do it twice, but that second try seemed to take care of it. Now, let's get that EGR on there and then start it. I'm gonna change the oil, and we'll see if we no longer have a red lightning bolt of death. Well, so far so good. That noise that I thought I heard that was a vacuum leak before, I don't think I hear it anymore, so I think it was that EGR pipe. I did go ahead and chase those threads, so I ran a tap into the hole, and I ran a die over each of the bolts, and it seemed to tighten down, I think, more than before. I can't tell. I'm pretty sure that when I tightened this before, when I replaced that EGR valve, it was like 2 years ago, it was pretty tight, so maybe it just loosened up over time. But I think it's going to relearn some of the, it's so clean now. The computer's probably going to relearn some of the things. It's going to, actually kick that EGR in, and we'll see if this thing, I think I'm going to drive it this week. So I'm going to let it sit here for a few minutes. Usually when it gets warm, about the time it kicks on the EGR valve is when the, when I have a problem with the electronic throttle control, red lightning bolt of death. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around. I've been hopeful before that the problem's fixed. I am like 95% now. That's better than 90 with the computer. And oddly enough, this entire time it could have simply been the EGR tube was not tight on the EGR valve. Yeah. So you might want to check your electronic throttle control to make sure if you have that problem. Check your EGR valve if you replace it. It could be a little bit loose, but I think that might be my problem. But like I said, this computer has made this thing run better than it ever has before. This is glass smooth. It's never run this smooth before, so I think there was some computer something going on. So it has helped, and that the way that intake was done before with those bolts, I really needed to do what I did here. So we'll let it warm up, maybe let it cool down, check the coolant in the morning, maybe drive it to work, and hopefully that's it. So yeah, thanks guys. If you've liked the journey so far on the Jeep, like and subscribe. I do have a video, I think on one of my shorts I showed where I did some, I have a longer video that I didn't show, I haven't posted yet, but I showed using the torch to burn that bumper and make it black. And it's still pretty dark. And it beads water, and it's in great shape, where this side with the special stuff that's made for plastic is almost completely gone. And we are right at almost exactly, maybe a few more days, just over a month. So I will probably make I don't know if I'll make just the video of what I did before, but I think I'm going to take this bumper off. I'm going to take the running boards off and the rear bumper, and I'm going to burn the whole thing, and we'll see how it turns out, and then see how long it lasts. I think taking it off is going to be best to get these to not burn up the my fog lights and other things, and I got to take that dent out, so I'll beat that dent out with a hammer. This one's been here since I got it. I think I'll knock that dent out as well. So yeah, we'll do that in another video. But again, thanks for watching. Hopefully the saga of the 07 Wrangler lightning bolt of death is the EGR tube. Yeah, thanks guys.